The Willies by Ethan Cranberry. On Halloween night, if you hear someone scream, like they've just woken up from a nightmarish dream, it might be a goblin or a ghoul or a ghost or a big hairy monster that scared them the most. But take it from me, out of all we can list, there are scarier things in the world that exist. There are things we can't see, but can certainly hear, and the sounds that they make fill our hearts up with fear. There are things we can feel, but we just cannot touch, and the thought of such things makes our heart beat too much. There are things we hear lurking behind closet doors, in our attics, our basements, our walls, and our floors. There are things that go bump in the darkness of night, and sometimes they even go bump in the light. Yes, of all of the monsters, the big and the small, the Willies, I'd say, are the worst of them all. And one night it had happened. Sometime around 8, I was on my way home and was running quite late. I was out on the street. I was not yet a teen, just a lad barely 12, out on Old Halloween. I had just left a friend's, where his dad told a story, a Halloween tale quite macabre and quite gory. Now, the story he told had no meaning or plot. It was just a grim tale meant to scare us a lot. But what scared me the most, and what stuck in my head, was the last thing of all out of all he said. He said, "On your way home there are things you might hear, but there's no need to worry, there's nothing to fear. For it's only the Willies out traipsing about, and on Halloween night they just love to come out. They'll be out there for sure. There's no one way you can check. All the hair will stand up on the back of your neck. Now, there's no need to panic, no cause for alarm. They just mean to scare you, they mean you no harm. But the Willies won't rest till their job is quite done. They will not rest at all till you cry, scream, or run. No, the Willies won't stop till they give you a fright, if it takes them all day or it takes them all night." And so there I was on Old Hollow Oak Lane, a wrong turn or two down from Elm Street and Main, a road that at night time was so dimly lit even cats holding flashlights could not see one bit. Yes, Old Hollow Oak Lane was a lane hardly traveled, an endless dirt road with some part slightly graveled, a long winding path through a deep darkened wood, where no one ever goes and no one ever should. And the full moon above had an odd eerie glow, with a cloud or two passing below it quite low, and the air was as still as a statue of stone, with a dampness that chilled me right down to the bone. It was growing quite dark. I could feel my heart race. I could barely see my hand right in front of my face. I should have turned back, should have turned right around. I was all by myself, not a soul to be found. And then came a noise, like the snap of a stick. I turned around fast. Boy, I turned around quick. "Who's out there?" I asked. But no one answered back. Just another twig snapped with a much louder crack. Yes, something was out there, a man or a beast, but which one did not matter at all in the least. No, whatever it was, I did not need to know, and one thing was quite clear, it was time I should go. It was time to move on. There was no need to stay, so I turned right around and went right on my way. I tiptoed off slowly, then quickened my pace. Then I found myself caught in an odd sort of chase. For the noises, as hoped, did not linger behind. And these noises were not simply things in my mind. No, these noises were real and kept right on my tail with each step that I took down that long darkened trail. Was it goblins or ghouls or some new-fangled curse? Or were all of these noises from something much worse? Then a chill that I felt, just a small tiny speck, grew and grew up my spine, then grew right up my neck. Then the hair on my neck rose with each inch I walked, a feeling one gets when they are now being stalked. And I knew at that moment my friend Stead was right. Yes, the Willies would come for me all through the night. They would not rest one bit till their job was quite done. They would not rest at all till I cry, scream, or run. And at first, I was frightened and angered at tad. Then the thought of these things chasing me made me mad. So I turned and put both of my hands on my hips, and I shouted so loudly I hurt both my lips. I said, "You'll never scare me, though try as you may. I won't scream, I won't cry, I will not run away. I will not run from noises, not one single inch. I will not bat an eye, I will not even flinch. You Willies are mean, you are not at all nice. And I'll tell you this once, I will not tell you twice. I will not be afraid, I will not play your game, and you are not welcome here. So go back where you came." And quite quickly, the noises all came to a stop, and the road felt so calm you could hear a pin drop. And so proudly I huffed and just turned without care, and walked off with my nose held up high in the air. But a few minutes later, not far around the bend, my troubles, it seemed, were quite far from their end. Something was wrong. I was not quite sure what, but something was not sitting well in my gut. I felt as though someone was looking at me, a deep, earnest stare that would not leave me be. Then the hair on my forearms now started to rise, and the hair on my neck stood up taller in size. Something was haunting me, chilling me so, making goosebumps rise up on my skin, head to toe. So I stopped, and I turned and looked deep in the trees, and saw something so scary it buckled my knees. Something was there in the darkness of night, just lurking around like a lurking thing might. And there in the forest, a shadow appeared. It was just as I thought, it was just as I feared, and this shadow alone would have been quite a sight. But what scarier still were its eyes big and white. Not once ever blinking, these eyes kept on glaring, just staring me down with a long endless staring. Then up came two more on its left and right side. Two shadows popped up and four eyes opened wide. And now there were three. It was 3 against 1. I wanted to leave, but my legs wouldn't run. I wanted to scream and I wanted to cry. Yet boldly I stood with my chin held up high. "Just go on and stare. Take a good look," I said. "Just stare all you want with those eyes in your head. I won't scream, I won't cry, I will not run away, I will not run from shadows, not now, not today. And I'll tell you again, like I've told you before. I'll say it again, one more time and no more. I will not be afraid, I will not play your game. And you're not welcome here, so go back where you came. And as quick as a blink, all 6 eyes closed up tight. In a snap, all 3 shadows disappeared from my sight. And quite certain I'd shooed off those Willies for good, I just turned and walked off just as fast as I could. Then onward I went for at least 1 more mile. No noises, no shadows, at least for a while. Quite cold and still lost. I was losing all hope. I was tired, worn out at the end of my hope. Then down from the sky shined a moonbeam, so bright, through the clouds that had parted the moon shined its light. And there up ahead, on the side of the road, in a small patch of grass that had never been mowed, was a sign on a post about as high as my head. "Welcome to old Johnson's farm," the sign read. Now the good news was this. I was no longer lost. The bad news, to get home would come at great cost. For I'd been out to old Johnson's farm quite a lot, but just not out this far, and nowhere near this spot. And this farm of old Johnson's was 3 miles wide, and the road where I lived was nowhere near this side. No, the road where I lived was 3 miles at best, through the cornfields of old Johnson's farm, heading west. Well, the first thing I wanted to do was turn back, but old Hollow Oak Lane had grown far too pitch black. There was no other choice, only one thing to do, march up to that cornfield and shove my way through. So I signed, and I walked past the sign and the post, wondering what things inside would now scare me the most. And I pushed it, and I shoved it, and I carved out a trail. Through the cornfield I went, over hill, over there. And for minutes it seemed I moved it onward quite well. But how far I had gone, I could not rightly tell. For the field was quite dim, and the corn was too tall, and beyond where I was, I could not see at all. I was wandering around like a mouse in a maze, my thoughts running wild, my mind in a daze. I was hopelessly lost. There was simply no doubt. I was trapped in this field and would never get out. Then all of a sudden, from the corner of my eye, a figure rose up from the cornfield quite high. Though it looked like a man, I could not rightly say, but whatever it was looking my way. On his head was a hat tilted down to one side. From his neck hung a scarf that was not tightly tied. On his back was a jacket quite tattered and torn. On his legs were some pants that in sports were quite worn. And there it just stood like a fiend in the night, its arms spread out wide like a bird taking flight, just waiting for someone like me to walk past, where its long arms could reach down and snatch me up fast. My heart went a-flutter, then started to pound. I could not speak a word. I could not make a sound. I was gasping for air. I could not find my breath. I could not move at all. I was quite scared to death. Then up from the small of my back came a chill, which went right up my spine like a chill often will. Then the hair on my back of my neck stood up straight, a feeling I'd say I had quite grown to hate. And I knew then and there that this man was no man. It was only the Willies doing all that they can. Who else would it be but the Willies? Of course, yes, the Willies had come back again in full force. And by now, I had had about all I could take. I was angry, annoyed, and in need of a break. Now listen, you Willies, I said with a sneer. You will not scare me off, not this month, not this year. I will not run away. I won't scream, I won't cry. You will not have your way, no matter how hard you try. And I really must add, you are not all that bright, because I've told you this 2 times already tonight. I will not be afraid. I will not play your game, and you're not welcome here, so go back where you came. And for what happened next, I was not quite prepared. For the man did not move. He just stood there and stared. Just standing there staring. Quite still, he just stood. And he stared like a scary man would. No, the Willies, it seemed, had not heard what I said. Or perhaps they just chose to ignore me instead. For the man had stayed put. He did not go away. Yes, the Willies, it seemed, were now quite here to stay. I was scared, you could tell by the look on my face, so backward I tiptoed away from that place. But to cry, scream, or run, I just simply would not. I instead calmly inched my way far from that spot. And for quite some time after, I pressed it on and on, the Willies still out there, the chills not quite gone. They were out there for sure, watching each step I took, quite determined to scare me by hook or by crook. And then lo and behold, where the cornstalks had parted, the cornfield had stopped where some blacktop had started. And there to my right, perhaps 2 to 3 feet, was a sign on the post that said, Old Maple Street. Then my heart leaped with joy. I could not help but smile. I knew I had made it. I'd be home in a while. For this street called Old Maple was one I knew well, and the house at its end was the house where I dwell. And in 5 or 6 minutes, maybe less, maybe more, I was on my front stoop heading through my front door. But inside, in the hall, good old Mum stopped me cold, asking why I'd come home past the time I'd been told. So I told her all about of the things I had seen, about the way I got lost, about the places I'd been. I told her the truth, though it sounded like lies, about the man in the field, about the shadows, the eyes. And I told her the story my friend Stead told me, while she stood there and listened quite curiously. But the more I went on, the further fetched it all sounded, and by the look on her face, I was sure I'd be grounded. But instead, Mum just laughed, then she patted my head, then she said a few things as she walked me to bed. She said, though you might think that the Willies are real, they are, in fact, only something that sometimes we feel. They are not made of flesh. They are not made of bone. They are just something our mind conjure up on their own. Now the noises, I'd say, were just raccoons at play, for they seem to come out more at night than by day. And the shadows and eyes were perhaps only deer, for they come out in droves this same time every year. And the man that you saw in the field, I suppose, had been put there on purpose to scare off the crows. So you see, my young son, you are being quite silly. There is nothing to fear and no such thing as a Willie. But later that night, in my bed tucked in tight, I stirred at the thought that not all was quite right. I had just heard a noise, like a low-sounding squeak. Then soon after that came a loud drawn-out creak. Then upright I sat, and looked right straight ahead. To the closet, I looked near the foot of my bed, for these noises I had heard once before. It was a noise from the hinge of my old closet door, but what's worse was the door opening all by itself, and two eyes staring down from the third or fourth shelf. Now, outside I could see how these eyes could be there, but inside, why on earth would a deer be in here? No, these eyes were the Willies. Who else would it be? They were at it again with their tomfoolery. I could tell it was them. They had come back for more, for the hair on my neck stood up just like before. So I yelled to my mum, who was right down the hall, and quite quickly she came in response to my call. Then she flicked on the light, and she asked me, "What's wrong?" To the closet I pointed, my arm stretched out long. But the eyes were now gone, and I looked like a fool. "Go to sleep," said my mum. "In the morning you'll have school." "But I saw them," I said. "I'm quite sure they were there. There were eyes staring back from the closet, I swear." But again Mum just laughed, and then gave me a pat. Then she bent down and picked up our old family cat. "Did the eyes look like his?" she asked, curious to know. Then she laughed at once again, and she let the cat go. "The Willies," she said, "are just all in your mind. There has never been any such thing of the kind." Then she walked to the door, and she flicked off the light, and she stopped, and she turned, and she whispered, "Good night." Good old Mum knew her stuff, and most likely knew best. On that note, I stretched it out for a long-needed rest. Then she put the door closed, and I felt fast asleep, and the room felt quite calm, not a sound, not a peep.